everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Timeout with Tackle What's Next, where we speak to athletes and executives about how sport has made a difference and changed the course of their lives and the lessons they've learned in life outside of the game. I am your host, Danielle Berman. I am the founder and CEO of Tackle What's Next, where we work to change the narrative around life after sports. Excited to be back with another Timeout. Tonight we are talking to my friend Michael Willett. Michael is a former D1 football player from the University of Central Florida. He won 3 conference championships during his time as a Knight, and since his playing years, he has created and now operates WalkOn Nation. It's an organization with the purpose of redefining athletic identity. So Michael and his team facilitate workshops at universities all over the country, organizations, NPOs, foundations, teaching athletes that they should be enhanced, not defined by their status. I love that. Excited to dig into that. And Michael has been a huge supporter of us here at Tackle What's Next. Really appreciate it. He's always willing to share his story, his insights, advice with our community. So I'm thrilled to catch up with him tonight. I know you guys are going to enjoy this conversation. I see he just popped in here, so let me bring him up and we will get started. Hey, Michael, how's it going?
Hey, Dan, how you doing? Long time no see.
Yeah, for real. How's everything been going?
Everything's been going really good. I cannot complain at all.
Not at all. Awesome. I know you've been all over the place. You've been doing a lot of workshops, working with a lot of different programs. Anything exciting that you want to share just from like the last few weeks?
Last few weeks, I mean, just a lot of planning for a fall semester and all that stuff. But it's definitely been a fun ride. The spring semester going in the fall, it's been really good. Really happy. You can't complain at all.
That is awesome. Well, I want to dig into your background and get into, what WalkOn Nation does and why you created it. So let's start from the very beginning. How did you get involved with sports? Do you remember your first experience playing sports? And then how did you get from that to football if it wasn't football?
My first experience playing sports, definitely basketball. I'm from New York, so that's the basketball capital. So ever. I got into football because my basketball coach asked me if I wanted to play. My dad actually played football but never introduced me to it or showed me it at all. So my basketball coach showed it to me, and from then on, at 8 years old, the rest is history. It got me to where I am today.
Awesome. And when you got into football, like what made you kind of say, all right, I want to pursue this to the collegiate level? Was it the love of the game? Did you already know kind of where you wanted to take it, going into college and taking it, using sport as a tool? How did you see football playing into your future?
At first, when I was a kid, it was just having fun. Sports is supposed to be fun. Football is supposed to be fun. But after a while, I started to notice I was getting good and I was getting more attention. Then I said, well, I can probably go somewhere with this sport. So let me put all my attention and focus into this and see where it can take me. And I'm glad I did because it got me to a lot of places, opened a lot of doors for me. And I'm really thankful that I took that step forward and took it serious.
Mm-hmm. And I know you said it opened a lot of doors for you. Can you tell me a little bit more about like the impact that playing any sport, football, basketball as a kid, just made impact on your life and who you are? Like, do you see any kind of like personality traits, skill sets that you have that you're like, I can directly attribute that to playing sports, to being involved with a program?
Definitely. I say sports is the only thing that transcends everything. So whether nationalities, backgrounds, none of that means anything. We're on the field, on the court, because we all blood, sweat, and tears. We all do the same exact stuff. So I was kind of open a lot to diversity and seeing other walks of life due to sports. Sports open that avenue. And we even see now in day-to-day, whatever sports does, whatever the culture does of sports, everything else follows suit. And that door doesn't open unless I see it myself and play that sport and live through that. So those are some of the doors I saw it open. No door is open like an athletic door. When you're an athlete, especially at the higher level you get, the doors just open more and more and more. Now it's your decision to step through them or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I think a lot of people don't look at sports as a door opener, right? They kind of see it as like an end point versus like an opportunity to move into other directions as well. Can you talk a little bit about, was that your mindset when you were playing? Did you grow into that mindset? Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like for you during that football career? Like, how did your identity tie into that? Were you looking for those open doors while you were playing, or is that something that you've seen like later in life? Like, okay, this is what I want athletes to do now.
When I first started playing, that was not even close on my radar. It was go straight to the league, football only.
Yeah.
I think it was when I got my career ending injuries when I noticed that, hey, I kind of got to make a shift. And noticing how many doors it opens and how many people want to gravitate athletes is really when I saw, all right, I can make something out of this rather than just sport or nothing. Is sport opens doors to the final thing that I actually want, which is doing what I do now at WalkOn Nation. But without, in the beginning, it was just I'm playing and that is it. I don't care less about networking, resume building. Don't talk to me about any of that. But as I got older, I saw the beauty of what's really behind the game if you walk into it, and that's when I started really networking and doing what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, and I love that you said doing what I was supposed to do, because I think a lot of athletes are in your position that you were when you were playing. Like, I don't have time for any of this. I need to focus on my sport. I need to put everything into my sport. I don't have time for distractions, right? That's a big word that a lot of people use. You know, what would you say to athletes now that maybe have that identity piece, or kind of have that mindset, I should say, around like, I don't have time to worry about what's next or what do I want, what doors I want to open. You know, how have you tried to change that mindset for athletes that are still in that position where the most doors are available to them?
Right. My thing is always, well, that's a lie. You do have plenty of time. And people think time is like you need to spend hours on hours on hours finding yourself. My big thing, especially with identity, is just take 15 to 30 minutes a day to prioritize yourself. You spend that through scrolling social media or just playing video games, whatever you want to do. I know, because I used to be hours on hours on the game, just playing, doing absolutely. I could take 10 to 15 minutes to really figure out who I am and explore myself. So there's plenty of time. I know there's distractions of, oh, I have this, I have that, I have meetings, I have film, I have coaches, I have classwork. Yes, you do. That is true, especially in college. I understand that. In fall semester, fall, I get it. You're locked down. But everything else, like spring, summer, you have time to find yourself. Don't use that as a crutch or an excuse, because once you're out, you can't get back in. Nobody wants a has-been. Everyone's for the next person up. That's the sports industry. The industry is what have you done for me lately? And if you haven't done anything for me lately, then someone else is doing it, and I'm focusing on them. And while you're in it, be that person that uses it to your advantage. Because if you don't, you will regret it.
I think that's such a great perspective. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. I really like that perspective that it's a season, right? You have your in season where, yeah, you probably are 80 to 90% focused on your sport, and then the other 10, 20 is school, right? As a student athlete. But then, yeah, spring, summer, like you still have a percentage of your life committed to your sport. But then, hey, you have all this extra time, and it's not saying, go get a full-time job, go get an internship. But like you said, 15 to 20 minutes, I know I spend more than 15 to 20 minutes scrolling on social media every day. Like, we all have extra time. It's just like you said, figuring out how am I going to prioritize myself. I love that term. And I wanted to talk about the identity piece too. But first, let's talk about like, how did you get into that transition? You talked about an injury that kind of opened your mindset. You know, as you're getting close to graduation, like, how did you navigate what was next for you, and what was that process like for you personally?
It was a very long process navigating what I wanted to do, who I was, because for forever it was football was my out, my I was gonna be my job. Then when it was taken away from me, I had to kind of figure it out. And do figuring it out, you do a trial and error, a bunch of other things. And I ended up interning at UCF, Student Athlete Welfare Development Office, where they do all the life skills, resume building, networking, and that's where I found my niche and my purpose again. And the thing I needed the most, UCF didn't really offer that much, not their fault at all, which was athletic identity, which I realized I'm going through this and I'm figuring myself out now because I have to. Most athletes don't go through this until they're way past gone than me, especially if you don't make the league and you're healthy and you can play and you're still striving for the league and all those other things. You're going to keep pushing and pushing till you can't no more, and then realize, wait, I have no idea who I am, and I'm 25 years old. And I need to find a job. I need to make money, and find an identity at that point is the last of your worries, because you have to be a human and live and have a roof over your head. So for me, it was really understanding that I don't want to be in that back against the wall situation. I have to figure something out now. And while I'm still in school, I know I have my resources I can use. I'm going to use them and figure out what I want. And that's how WalkOn Nation grew about.
Yeah. And how did you decide to start a business around this? Was it something that you were just like, hey, let me kind of see what I want to do, and then I'm going to take these lessons and move forward? Was there like a moment that you were like, this needs to be like a company that I'm running? Like, how did you figure out that process? It sounds like you had great experience and opportunities out on campus to engage with similar programming and kind of see what was there, maybe what you wanted to enhance on your own. But tell me more about that process, because starting a business is no easy feat either. So kind of what led you to that journey?
It was phases, I would say. I would say the name WalkOn Nation was a thing before the program itself.
Mm,
Had this name of WalkOn Nation, this is going to be something. Let me get a logo and trademark it. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but I'll figure it out eventually. So I did that and like put it on the back
yeah.
burner. Then I started creating a program for like, well, it was called AIR, Affirmation, Integrity, Readiness. Then I ended up bunching that in the WalkOn Nation. So I just put it on the one. I said everything that I want in this program symbolizes what WalkOn Nation is, an identity. So that's how I blended it into one, and that's how the company became what it was. The name was always there. It was the concept and idea behind it, which was floating around, that ended up bringing into it. And then from there, it became a business. At first, it was going to be like clothing or whatever it was going to be. I had no idea, but I'm glad I did it this way.
Yeah, I love the idea of just you have this idea or this concept and not waiting for it to be like fully fleshed out, totally ready to go. Like I've got a website, I've got prospective clients, like I've got it all planned before you like take that first step. Because I do think a lot of people think, well, if I'm going to start a business, like I have to know exactly everything and have everything perfectly lined up and ready to go before I like hit the start button, right? The publish button. And I love that you were like, look, I did it in phases. Like I had this idea for a name and a logo, and I was like, let me keep this at the back of my mind. And then programming came. I think that's really helpful for people to hear that, yes, it can grow and develop as you grow and develop. And look what you're doing now. I mean, you are working with all these different programs, and I bet you've learned a lot in that process of just like building and iterating and growing. Can you tell me a little bit about what that entrepreneurial journey has been like and any advice you would give to someone that's thinking about starting?
I'll say being an entrepreneur is very similar to being an athlete. You work on the fly. Nothing is set in stone, and there's always work to be done. Once you think you have something finished, there's a million other things that come on the back end. So you're always forever doing things, forever working. I think being an athlete and entrepreneur go hand in hand, because the biggest thing with any business is being able to pivot and adapt. And athletes are the kings and queens of pivoting and
Mm-hmm.
adapting, because that's how we work on the court, in the pool, wherever you put us. We have to adapt on the fly. Of course, you game plan and stuff for these things, but things change on the fly. Same thing with business. Things change on the fly, new laws, social media, wherever it may be, you have to pivot. So just having that mindset, being an athlete over smoothly, and to being an entrepreneur. So if you're thinking about it, do it. If anyone tells you that they have it all figured out, they're lying to you. No one figured it out. It's all winging it and going with the flow and figuring out as we go. So you can figure out as you go too. Just jump in and go from there.
Oh, I love it. And it's so true. None of us know exactly what we're doing or where we're going. And I will say, like, Tackle with Sex is completely different from my vision that started 4 years ago. There's some concepts that are the same, right? But like, you have to kind of let the market, the people you're working with, the clients you're trying to find, like they kind of dictate to you like what's working, what's not. And I love that advice of, like there's so much similarities between what skills you need to be an entrepreneur and the skills you have as an athlete. And I would also say, even if you're not going to be in an entrepreneurial role, even if you're working for an organization or you're working for a specific, nonprofit, smaller team where you have your hands kind of going into different tasks, like the skills you have as an athlete are so valuable, and so many people will take note and respect and actually find value in those skills. It's just translating them to that new arena. So I appreciate that advice. It's like, you're so prepared. Like, you don't need years of experience, right? You don't need to like have started a business before or like worked in an organization. If you have an idea, you have the skill sets, intangibly to go for it. So I appreciate that advice. That's great advice.
Yeah, I had to learn it the hard way. That's anything with that. You have to learn it the hard way. That's anything in life, though. Sometimes you just got to get with it and stand right back up and go through it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point. It's sometimes you need to figure it out your own way. And I think entrepreneurship teaches you so many lessons that you're like, okay, it's can be demoralizing sometimes, but like you said, the perspective is like, can I learn from this? Can I learn from the setback? Can I move and grow? And sometimes you learn more from those big setbacks and those big no's than you would from if somebody had just said yes. You wouldn't be changing and growing as much. So some of the best things that have happened to tackle what's next is people saying, I don't think that's a fit, or no, or I hit this big challenge. I'm like, what am I going to do? It's like, COVID was a big pivot moment for a lot of people. So it's just, I think it's a great perspective, and I appreciate that advice, because it's certainly not an easy task, but if people are up for the challenge, it's fun, right? It can be rewarding too.
It definitely is. I think the last advice I have with that is, yes, you pivot, but don't pivot too much from where you completely lose what the core was. If the core stays the same, you can branch off. But if the core changes, then you should just give it up at that point, because then the market dictated you too much.
Yes.
To where there's you want to offer. You know what you want to offer, you can offer it in different branches. Don't let it completely flip your company, though.
Yeah. I always say, like, the vehicle could change, but the journey and destination should be the same, right? Like, you're still trying to do the same thing. It might look a little different how you're doing it, maybe because you've learned and grown and seen, like, okay, maybe it's not this audience, it's this audience, or maybe it's not, this type or tool, but it's this tool. But like the destination's the same. You just might be taking a different vehicle to get there. So that's really good advice. You don't want to change to the point where you're like, oh, this isn't even what I wanted to do in the first place. But yeah, that's really great advice. And I want to go back to what you're doing at WalkOn Nation, because we talked at the very top about you're traveling to these schools and programs and talking about athlete identity and figuring out who they are, and also just almost kind of talking about their lives outside of the game, what they can do and kind of grow as an individual. Can you tell me a little bit about, you have this saying that they should feel enhanced by their athlete status. How did that term come about? Why is that so important for you to go to these groups of athletes and talk about, like, why do you do what you do? Why do you see the value in it?
The term came about, I do my best thinking in the shower. So knowing the just hit me like, oh, that's exactly what we stand for, what this company stands for. Because too many times athletes are defined by being an athlete. And once you take that away from them, they are no longer nothing in their eyes. Our counter to that is, it is just a facet that enhances you as a person. Being an athlete, like we talked about at the top, it opens so many doors. But if I go into the door and say, hi, I'm an athlete, okay, what else can you offer me? There's so much more to you, and knowing that follow-up to that, okay, what else? That's the whole part of being enhanced, not defined. Being an athlete, especially the higher up you get, everyone gravitates to you due to the fact you're an athlete. But once you're comfortable in your core and know who you are, now you can really show the world who you are and network and build all these things so you can be super successful in life and do it the way you wanted to. Not letting the world dictate you, but you dictate it. So many times athletes put their self-worth in others, and you can never put your self-worth in others because they'll always fail you, because they don't live in, only you can live in your body, and that's it. So as Caps, after when we were 0-12, we lost every single game. We were called losers. You guys suck. Get out to school. The fans were even worse. I'm like, you guys know we're like still, our brains aren't fully developed. We're still basically kids. We're like 18, 19. So we're like, oh, kick the kid out of school. He sucks in second and third. Go undefeated, and there they go praising us. Yep. The same exact fans, blah, blah, blah. If I put my self-worth in that person, I'm in for a world of trouble. You have to put it in yourself and realize that you make yourself who you want to be. Prioritizing you is the first step in anything. Once you can lead yourself, you can lead others. But if you can't lead yourself, you can lead nobody at that point. So that's why we're so big on being enhanced, not defined by athletic status.
Yeah, no, I really like that perspective. And the example you gave is a great one, because I think a lot of us find value in how others perceive us, and what others say we're amazing at or we're good at is what we internalize to say, well, this is what matters. This is what other people see. And sometimes we're so focused on that outward perception that we're not thinking about, how do we see ourselves? Like, what do we care about? What's important to us? And I think especially for athletes that are so focused on results, right? The outcome. Can we win the game? Can we reach the goal? What's my stat line? Can I make the shot, right? It's so results driven, and success is dictated by numbers, right? But what really matters, if we're looking at like a whole lifetime, is like, what did I learn from that loss? What did I learn? What skills have I gained? What friendships, what relationships? And so I think having that internal compass of, like you said, yeah, that fan means nothing to you. Their perspective of whether you win or lose a game or how great the team is, sure, it probably hurts in the short term, but long term means nothing to how valuable you are as a person, what you've learned from this experience, right? So I love that perspective of finding that kind of guiding light in yourself and saying, like, this is what matters to me. And this person has a perspective, and that's great, but that doesn't mean that my perspective or my value is better or worse because they think this. It's hard to do. So I'm wondering, what do you guys do with these athletes you're working with? Like, what kind of advice are you giving them in terms of how do you shift into that mindset? Is there any advice you can give to somebody that's like, I mean, sure, I'd love to start to do that. Where do I begin?
For me, it begins with growth, begins with isolation. You have to
Mm.
self in order to find yourself. So many times we look for ourselves validated to social media, scrolling, all those other things. I didn't truly grow until I was really on my own and realized like I have to deal with myself. If you can't look yourself in the mirror and like what you see, how do you expect someone else to like it? So you have to fix that and truly understand like this is authentic me and I love authentic me. And somebody else will. If they don't, great. Everyone's not supposed to love you anyway. If they do, then it's a miss and there's a problem. You have to truly be an authentic self. I know it's easier said than done, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that are right in front of our face that we don't notice until someone tells you. Like that whole self-worth thing, a lot of athletes don't notice until I say, they're like, oh, that's right. Everyone does that to me. Like if you walk into class with gear, everyone stares at you. If you don't have gear, no one pays you attention. You see, it's right in front of your face. We just don't really pay attention to it because we're not trying to. But when you put somebody, when you open the door and they walk through it and you show them that this is what's in there, then their eyes are more open. You don't know what you don't know. But now that
Mm.
I've told you, you have no excuse about, oh, I didn't know what this really happened out there. I said it and you see it. So now that you see it and you're enlightened to it, now you can come for that.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And I think the idea of just having the conversation and exposing individuals to this conversation and like you said, just kind of highlighting that this exists and there is something there to see. Sometimes that's like half the battle. But I really love what you said about isolation because I don't think we spend enough time with ourselves, by ourselves. And like you said, there's so much noise. There's social media, there's content, there's TV, there's just like podcasts now. Like you can be by yourself and not be alone with yourself ever. You don't have to be. There's no way. Sometimes I love flying because I'm like, I could actually disconnect from folks for like a solid 2 hours. And if I don't want to like read a book or listen to a podcast or anything, I could just sit with myself for 2 hours. Like sometimes we need that. And so I appreciate that being advice because I think a lot of people look outward for like, what should I be doing? What advice should I be taking? And sometimes it's just like sitting with yourself and just like listening to like, hey, what do I need right now? Like, what am I actually excited about? And it's easier said than done, right? It's not like you're going to sit with yourself for an hour and be like, all right, I got it, solved it. Like, I know who I am now. But if you do it enough consistently and you just take that time to pause and listen, you'll probably start to hear more of what you want and start to recognize what you don't want in situations as you're experiencing them too. So I think that's really, really good advice. I appreciate that.
For me, there's a such thing as too much input. When there's so much input, you start to question yourself. I'm always with go with your gut feeling. When you go against your gut, it's always wrong. It's 100% wrong. You always say, dang, I should have went with my original feeling. There's a reason behind that. Go with your intuition. When there's too much input, you start questioning, what about this? What about this? What about this? Who cares? Too many choices is bad choices.
Yeah.
I always break it down into two. I have a one and a two. Nothing outside of that. Because too much, then you start thinking and you end up being stuck in the same place. And while you're stuck, people are happening. While you're still stuck contemplating, someone else just took your spot now. Just because you were overthinking it too much. Trust your gut and go with your gut.
Mm. That's great advice. And I think in a world with so much choice and so many opportunities to explore things, it can be hard to decide, like if we're talking about it in a context of like, what doors do I want to open as an athlete? There's so many doors, right? You could open so many doors. But I love that. Like think about those top two and focus on those. Because guess what? If you find out you don't like it, you can go open more doors. But if you start too late, the doors start to disappear. So that's why I love that perspective of like focus on one or two, move forward. And hey, if you don't like it, you back out, you go in the next one. So I really appreciate that advice. I think, again, like so important, especially for someone in school right now, learning and seeing this perspective can be so helpful, because as your career as an athlete progresses, and no matter what happens, you've started that process. And I want to get a one perspective from you as we start to wrap up on time here. You know, with NIL coming into this college athlete experience, right? There's obviously a lot of things that could go wrong, but I think there's also this angle of like you really start to have to think about yourself as more than an athlete, because you have this opportunity to create relationships with companies. Have you seen that making a difference in these last couple of years of how athletes you guys are working with at programs are thinking about themselves? Do you see it starting to play a role at all? And what is your perspective on how that will make an impact on this work we do?
There's a good and a bad for NIL. The good is because we just part, but the bad part is now we're looked at even more as a commodity and what money off the athlete. That's why I feel like what WalkOn Nation, the identity piece, is so important, because that's the foundation. If I know who I am, I now know what doors I want to open. Now, if I don't know and all these doors start coming at me, now a company dictates what they want me to be rather than vice versa. If I'm the person you want to sell your stuff, I dictate what's going on. So this is who I am. This is what I do. If you match this or you don't. Athletes don't understand that they have the power in their hands. Athletes are powerful when it comes to this. If we were to all stop playing tomorrow, everything shuts down. But athletes don't realize that. We think it's vice versa, that we just have to do this, have to do that. But athletes have to understand, especially with NIL, that you have the power. But that power starts with you first, understanding who you are. If not, the world will shape you to what it wants you to be. You should always shape the world to what you want it to be, to work for you, not vice versa. So with NIL, the big thing why we keep doing what we're doing so much is find the identity piece. Because nowadays, everyone's like, where can I get my next check? This looks like good money, but all money is not good money. There's a lot of bad things, a lot of bad deals. You need to square in your foundation before you start jumping at these big contracts. I mean, contracts aren't the big, but they just have terrible deals. Because once taxes come around and no one told you about that, you have to pay all that back, and then we have even more problems. So I'm hoping that this NIL settle down. It feels like it's a wild, wild west out there. I hope that there's becomes more regulations to where athletes can really be athletes again. To me, it's turning amateur sports into professional, to where high school, coming out of high school and thinking about what contract can I get, what this and what that. Forget the school, forget about who I am, who has the biggest check for me, which that's not the best thing for every athlete. There are some superior athletes. So, for example, like LeBron James, Kevin Garnett, they came from high school to the NBA. That's different, but that is not everyone. 99% of you won't make it to that level. So we all can't think like that. We all have to think of what can last me for a long time, for generations, not just here and now.
Yeah, I think that perspective is so great, because it's just back to what you were talking about earlier, is like understanding where you want your sport to take you, and understanding that there are many doors open that don't include professional sports. And unfortunately, like many folks won't be able to get into that door. So I think there's such value in what you're saying, is like, NIL's great. If it works for you, awesome. But if you have no idea who you are outside of your sport and what value you can offer and where you want to utilize NIL, it's almost setting yourself up for failure by trying to sign deals with organizations. You should be doing that diligence of like, all right, what am I interested in? Is there a company that maybe can offer me like an internship or an opportunity to learn, in addition to maybe doing some content opportunities? Because this is a field I'm very interested in. There's so many more things besides the check. And I think you're right. Like, it's shaping sports to be even more of a high pressure, high touch. Like, I have to maximize my opportunity at this moment for so many young people, when, like you said, it's taking the fun out of a lot of things. So like, I think that's really good advice for folks navigating that as a student athlete. We'll see what happens, but you know, we're hitting the 2-year anniversary and so much has changed that I feel like there's so many more athletes thinking about it as, yes, I am more than an athlete, but like you said, there's not a lot of regulation to protect them from mistakes that they're making, perhaps.
Right. I'm more than an athlete, but I'm going to get a check. So it's different than let me find myself as I'm more how can I make this money now? It's like, wait a
Yeah.
minute. You have to find out who you are. Because professionals make a lot of money. In 5 years, they're broke because they've been an athlete their whole life and never really figured out who they really were. So you can get the money, but if you don't find out who you are, there's a downhill waiting for you. That's life. There's always a obstacle that hits you right in the face. If that's just how life works, you prepared for that. Be able to bounce back from it. If not, you're in for a long road ahead.
Mm. Well, I think that's really a great perspective to end it on, because it is so much more important than the check, right? It's the longevity of setting yourself up for success as an individual in life and making sure you're happy and can provide for yourself and your family. Before we leave, I want to make sure you can let us know what's coming up for WalkOn Nation. You talked about preparing for fall. I'm sure you guys have a lot of places on your visit list to go. Anything that you're working on or kind of have in the pipeline that you want to shout out before we sign off?
Just see, we'll be at a lot of universities this fall coming up, different programming. We're trying to get on a digital space to bring out a workbook and ebook for the athletes we can't reach. So be on the lookout for that. It's in the works behind the scenes. But other than that, just the mission stays the mission, just helping athletes wherever, whether that be D1 to high school, professional. I don't care. If you're an athlete, you need this conversation. There is no place where we won't go to speak to athletes.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you for so much for your time. And if anyone's listening and they want to bring WalkOn Nation to their school or learn more about some of the programs and resources you have, where can they find you? How can they connect and follow you? What's the best way to get that info?
There's definitely a website, walkonnation.org, here on Instagram, walkon_nation. Same thing with Twitter, LinkedIn, same thing. You can find us website, wherever you find WalkOn Nation, that's where you can connect, and we will be there to answer. We're here to serve. That's our main mission, is we're here to serve.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thanks again, as always. Such a great conversation, awesome advice, and I really appreciate all your support of what we're doing. I love the mission of what you guys are doing, and honestly, just, anyone that's on this, I'm seeing some great comments in the chat. Our guy Belford's here. What's up, Belford? Thanks for tuning in, man. But yeah, thank you for being here. Thanks for all you're doing for athletes. Thanks to everyone that tuned in, and for those watching later. I know you guys got a lot out of this too, but be sure to follow Michael, connect with WalkOn Nation, and hopefully we got a few more schools on your radar this fall for you to pop in and visit. So thanks again for taking the time. I always appreciate you.
Thanks, Danielle. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.